Hello, I am Deputy Foreign Editor Albert Wai, and welcome to Asian Insider. This episode is on Taiwan and the latest state of play in its relations with the mainland. We'll be talking about Taiwan's current foreign policy preoccupations, as well as the specific messaging that it wants to send to China and to the world. My usual partner in crime, ST's senior China correspondent Yu Lun Tian, is currently on vacation, so I'll be speaking to our Taiwan correspondent Yip Wai Yee today. Wai Yee has been based in Taipei for almost 3 years, and she has covered a wide range of issues from the political scene to the 2024 Hualien earthquake, and more recently on what some might consider ugly-looking iron window bars in Taiwanese homes. Hello, Wai Yee.
Hi, Albert. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. And yes, the Taiwan window bars. I think that story actually did pretty well. It has resonated with people who did say that some of these bars were quite ugly.
When I go to Taiwan, I used to think that they were ugly, but now when I go again next time, I'm going to look at them using different lenses after reading your story. And without further ado, let's dive right into it. Wai Yee, you were at Foreign Minister Lin Chia-lung's press conference. For those who might not have read your story, can you tell them what was his main message to China?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this was a press conference that he had with foreign correspondents. And I think before I go into his message to China, I'll just speak a little bit about some of the things that he spoke about. So Minister Lin was talking about a lot of the recent developments in what he calls Taiwan's integrated diplomacy. And that's based on 3 pillars, which is values-based, economic, and alliance-based. And this is obviously not just with Taiwan's official diplomatic allies, but also, in exploring more substantive, unofficial ties with places such as the US, Europe, and Japan. So what are we taking away from this? And that is that the central message in this to China is that Taiwan is not alone. It's going to continue to advocate for its right to international participation, for example. And the minister has also emphasized Taiwan's commitment to democracy and also Taipei's opposition to China's expansionism. And also some of the moves that he says are threatening the international rules-based order. And what was interesting was he was very direct and straightforward. As you know, Albert, diplomats are usually very cautious in their language, but he very openly names the Communist Party of China several times to be behind so many of the moves that he says are undermining regional stability. So, for example, he constantly talks about how it has been difficult for diplomats such as himself to travel to Europe in the past, and he very directly blames Chinese pressure for this. And he also says that there's actually a lot that European countries can learn from Taiwan in terms of its survival game amid China's intimidation and coercion measures. So it was an interesting session to attend.
Well, let's face it, Taiwan's diplomatic space has been shrinking, right? I mean, China has been chipping away at Taiwan's list of partners with former diplomatic relations one by one. And if I remember correctly, the figure is now down to 11. Is Taiwan concerned about this, or does it not actually matter so much anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's actually 12, and it still matters in terms of, I think, these diplomatic allies are there to basically speak up for Taiwan in international organizations. Even though a lot of these diplomatic allies are very small, and if you look at in terms of, for example, GDP, they're tiny. But without these official allies, no one's recognizing Taiwan officially. So as important as unofficial ties are, I think Taiwan still values these official allies very much.
I have to ask about the China-Japan spat over
Yes.
Taiwan because it is raging right now. I know it doesn't actually concern Taiwan directly, but I suppose Taipei must be watching the developments from a positive point of view at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's an interesting. So from Taipei government stance, they've certainly endorsed Ms. Takaichi's words. So Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te had urged the international community to keep paying close attention to the matter. And he urged China to exercise restraint and demonstrate the conduct that he says should befit a major power instead of becoming a troublemaker for regional peace and stability, which are, as usual, strong words. Interestingly, however, in Taiwan, there are critics, on the other hand, including these are members from the opposition Kuomintang, who they warned that Taiwan might actually be pulled into a Japan-China confrontation. So Ms. Zheng Liwen, who's the newly elected chair of the party, and we should note that she's seen to be particularly Beijing-friendly. So she said that Japan was actually adding fuel to fire amid what she says is already a very highly sensitive regional climate. So there's differing views in Taiwan. What I found to be also interesting is that when we look at what the Taiwanese public think, outside of the government, Taiwanese have long had confidence in Japan. And this has actually shown to be greater than the confidence in Japan than the US. So like some polls over the years have shown that a large proportion of Taiwanese actually believe that Japan may one day come to their defense in the event of a Chinese invasion. And that number has been higher than what they believed the US to be. So that's something to continue to monitor, I think.
Let's talk a little bit more about Zheng Liwen, because clearly she's important to Beijing's narrative on what they call national reunification.
Yeah.
What do you make about her political career so far, and do you think she's going to significantly alter the balance of power in terms of the discourse within Taiwan itself?
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. I think Zheng Liwen, so Beijing was obviously very happy that she has been named the new chair because she has made many very pro-Beijing statements in the past. And for China to openly congratulate her for winning the chairmanship says a lot about what they think. I think they see a window of opportunity here to maybe reach out to Taiwan in another way, because they obviously have a lot of distrust of President Lai Ching-te and his Democratic Progressive Party. So I think they're seeing maybe there's an opportunity here to work with the opposition even closer and perhaps shore up some closer ties in a different way through the opposition. But I think what we should note is that a lot of the things that she says is very controversial and not what most Taiwanese think. So a lot of Taiwanese are very, they believe strongly that they identify as Taiwanese and not Chinese, which is very different from what Zheng Liwen is saying. So whether what she's doing or how her ties will be with China will actually be, accepted by the rest of Taiwan, I think that's a different question. So we'll have to see.
You've covered Taiwan under Tsai Ing-wen and now Lai Ching-te. So both are from the DPP, of course, but in terms of managing cross-strait ties, do you see a clear division between them when it comes to how they approach the issue?
I think what a lot of people think is that Lai Ching-te, which this was not surprising, right? Even before he was elected, many analysts already said Lai Ching-te, no matter how careful he chooses to be, he will always be seen as more leaning towards the independent side than Tsai Ing-wen. Tsai Ing-wen is much more cautious when it comes to her language. But at the same time, some people say that Lai Ching-te has no choice but to be a little bit more forceful as well, because whatever Tsai Ing-wen did, it didn't really help cross-strait communication either. She was very, very pragmatic and very cautious, but cross-strait ties were just still very tense and continued to escalate. So I think people who support Lai Ching-te are saying, well, if you continue to just to go down that path, it's not going to help anyway. And no matter what he says, they're not going to like it. So I think there's a different approach here. Yeah.
I'm going to switch topic to the Trump-Xi summit that took place in Busan. So there was some speculation before that Trump might sacrifice Taiwan for better ties with China. And from China's point of view, of course, Taiwan is what I call a big and fat red line.
Yeah.
But somehow the issue wasn't raised between Trump and Xi. So how have Taiwanese interpreted this?
Yeah. Taipei, they framed it as a sign of the strength of Taiwan-US ties, actually. So there was definitely this cautious sigh of relief. I think immediately that night, of the Trump-Xi meeting, the Taiwan's presidential office spokeswoman, she reiterated the line that, Taiwan's communication with Washington is smooth and that Taipei will continue to be in close contact with the US. So they've been trying to push this line very hard. And I think why it was not mentioned in the meeting is anyone's guess. There's different theories. Some say that it's because given the short time that they had in the meeting, the meeting only lasted 100 minutes. So China and the US had more pressing matters, I think, to deal with more urgently at the time, such as trade tensions. I think they needed to stabilize some of these relations without going into a very sensitive and thorny subject like Taiwan in such a short amount of time. And this was their first face-to-face meeting since 2019. And also I think for China, Taiwan has just always been non-negotiable. So it's not that the fact that they didn't mention it here, that they may not mention it in the future. So I think Taiwan still has to watch this very closely. And there's some experts who even called Beijing's silence on the matter as a form of strategic patience, which I thought was interesting. They said that, just because they didn't mention it now doesn't mean they abandoned the issue. Obviously, they still care about it deeply. And maybe Beijing could be saving it for a more maybe advantageous moment down the road.
And obviously, Trump and Xi will meet again in 2026. Mm-hmm. So looking ahead, what's at stake for Lai Ching-te's government?
Yes. So actually leading up to that, I think we need to first talk about how on November 24th, Trump and Xi actually had a phone call. And this is where Xi actually did raise the issue of Taiwan. So according to Chinese state media, Xi told Trump that Taiwan's reunification with China is an important component to the post-war international order, and that Trump replied that the U.S. acknowledged Taiwan's importance to China. So since then, Taiwan has come out with several statements, including from the Taiwanese premier, Chou Rong-tai, who said that reunification is not an option for Taiwan. But I think going back to your question about their upcoming meeting in 2026, which will be held in Beijing in April, Taipei will certainly be watching that very, very closely. So for now, I think in the meantime, Taipei is working hard to assure the public that, its relationship with Washington remains very strong. So in my meeting with the foreign minister, Ling Jialong, he said that Taiwan did not need to be overly worried about the U.S. potentially sacrificing Taiwan's interests. And those were his actual words, overly worried. And his reason for that was that he believed strongly that harming Taiwan would also harm U.S. interests. And also at the same time, I think for now, the Lai administration will continue to work not just to maintain warm ties with the U.S., but also extend further outreach to other like-minded partners and friends, such as Japan and Europe.
When we talk about tariff negotiations with America, what really seems to matter is how much investments a particular trade partner is prepared to commit to the U.S. And Japan pledged to invest US $550 billion. I think South Korea's figure was $350 billion US dollars. Where are the negotiating parameters for Taiwan when it comes to this sort of issue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Taiwan said that they're actually going to employ what they call a Taiwan model. So they're not going to do what Japan and Korea has done, which is just invest billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. It's not so simple as just a single number that way. So Taiwan is going to work on a different system where they will partner more closely in terms of other businesses and maybe invest not just direct investments. And I think the thing about the tariffs, Taiwan knows that it has a very strong leverage, I think, in these negotiations, right? Which is it's part in the semiconductor supply chain. Taiwan is a global leader when it comes to producing advanced chips. So I think even though there's been a lot of these, uncertainties over how these tariff talks will continue, I think Taiwan for now is still rather confident that their dominance in the chip sector will be quite a significant bargaining chip in negotiations. And I think the latest is that Taiwan has said, hopefully there will be an announcement on the finalized reduction in tariffs by the end of the month, but we will see what happens.
I have a follow-up question for Taiwan's crucial role in the global semiconductor supply chain. I get your point that it feels confident at the moment, but compared to, say, 1 year ago before Trump started all his tariff war? Are you seeing more confidence in Taiwan's diplomacy when it talks about semiconductor supply chain now, or has it actually sort of dipped this year with the tariff war pretty much raging everywhere?
Mm-hmm. I think actually they are very concerned. I do think there is a bit of dipping in that confidence, even though they're confident that they're leaders. But for example, every move that Taiwan makes in terms of investing more to produce in the U.S., which is what President Trump wants, that does lead to some criticism among some quarters in Taiwan that Taiwan's so-called silicon shield is weakening. So the more what they call giving away technology, which may weaken Taiwan's role as a dominant player in the chip industry. But I think at the same time, right now, Taiwan is still very adamant in producing the most advanced technology in Taiwan. So even though it has significantly pledged to invest production in the US, they will always be one generation behind Taiwan. So that means that Taiwan is still very, very crucial in the manufacturing of the most advanced chips. And frankly, it takes years and years to build an entire semiconductor supply chain. So it's not like you can just replicate this overnight. So I think, even though there is some concern here, I think generally they're still pretty confident.
No discussion about Taiwan and the mainland would be complete without a mention of the so-called gray zone tactics. Let's talk about what you are seeing on the ground in relation to these gray zone tactics and how Taiwanese society has been affected.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think for people who don't know what gray zone activities, I'll just say briefly, they're basically actions that are considered to be below the threshold of war. And Taiwan has obviously been affected by such activities very significantly. So it's through a combination of, it can be military, it can be informational or economic pressures, for example. And what we're seeing that means is that, Taiwan is receiving near daily military incursions. China sends military planes and vessels across the so-called median line of the Taiwan Strait all the time. And there's also things like propaganda, there's disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, even economic coercion, which I think regular Taiwanese would feel very strongly. So I think, for example, in the past, China has banned various Taiwanese agricultural products, such as, pineapples, sugar apples, and fish. And they always cite reasons like pest infestations or other irregularities. But actually, it's really just to create economic pressure on Taiwan's farmers and food producers. I think more recently in the past, a new tactic they've employed is civilian fishing boats and Coast Guard vessels to repeatedly cross into Taiwan's claimed territorial waters. So what they do is they go there to fish, they harass Taiwanese vessels, and they conduct what they call inspections. These activities, basically, the reason they're doing this is that China is essentially trying to tell the world that we can do these activities because these are our internal waters. There's no such thing as Taiwan's claimed waters because Taiwan to China is part of China. So these are things that Taipei obviously rejects.
And there's been so much of these gray zone tactics happening. Have people become numb to it?
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's the danger here, that if, for example, with the near daily military incursions, I think when they first started happening, Taiwan was very, very, very worried. And, these things were reported on a daily basis, right? But recently, if you look at Taiwan media, and I'm watching Taiwan news every day, they don't go into detail anymore about the numbers because it's just part and parcel of daily life now. And which I think there is a bit of concern here that if Taiwanese become numb to this, they will be less resilient to if one day, something actually breaks out, and they may not see it as urgent anymore. So I think there is a bit of concern about that. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what some people call the China invades Taiwan narrative. There's lots and lots of speculation surrounding it.
Yeah.
What is the first thing, Wai Yee, you would do if it comes to pass? I mean, other than writing writing for ST to tell people what's happening over there, what's the first thing you would do personally if war indeed does break out?
I mean, I find a safe spot first. But actually, you know what I do need to do is to pack what they call a go bag. So recently, more Taiwanese, I think, in some places are beginning to pack go bags. No, not just for in case of an invasion, but also for natural disasters. But I think we should, living in a place that is a potential flashpoint, I think people do need to be a bit more on their toes. And that is the criticism that some people have about Taiwan, is that they've been so used to these threats for so long that, they've become completely numb, as you say. So I think, I need to probably pack a go bag.
I'm suddenly interested. What is in the go bag? Give us a summary of the things that you have put in there.
Yeah, I have yet to do it, but I will. So I think apparently you're supposed to have like a flashlight and a radio, and I don't know what else actually. I need to look into this. Yes.
Okay, I want to touch a little bit more on Vice President Xiaobi Kim's address at the European Parliament. I mean, it was quite a breakthrough, wasn't it? What does it say about Taipei's foreign policy priorities at the moment?
Yeah. It was considered a breakthrough because, first of all, she was the first sitting Taiwanese vice president to deliver a speech in the European Parliament. And that's very significant for Taiwan because, most countries don't have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan due to pressure from China, of course. So that's a very big step forward for Taiwan's unofficial diplomacy. And the fact that it was kept highly confidential until just before her arrival, I think that demonstrates some support for Taiwan among European lawmakers who had to obviously help to facilitate this trip and invite her in the first place. So, and in her speech, she was talking a lot about the importance of democratic partners standing together. And these are things that resonate with European priorities as well. Just days after that, former Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen also visited Germany and delivered a speech there. So all these moves, I think what we're seeing is that they signal it's a growing kind of normalization of Taiwan's presence at some of these forums in Europe. And also this effort to just proactively engage with the world on its own terms, especially with places that's beyond the US. So Europe, in that case, will, going forward, definitely play a big part, I think. I think if there's a bit of, as Taiwanese confidence, I think in US support has, under this very unpredictable President Trump, it could be wavering a little bit. So Taiwan has to actively engage other partners, and Europe is going to be a big part of that, to kind of diversify its partnerships and just to reduce an over-reliance on Washington, I think. Yeah.
Obviously, China will host APEC in 2026, and Taiwan is also a member. So it's sensitive and complicated, and probably even more complicated next year. If I ask you to gaze into your crystal ball, what can we expect from APEC?
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And we're frankly already beginning to see some of these sensitivities play out right now. So the thing is, China has said that Taiwan has to attend under the name China Taipei. And that's different from the name that Taiwan normally goes by at international events, which is Chinese Taipei. They have a very different meaning. So for example, experts have said that by calling it China Taipei is very similar to how Hong Kong China or Macau China are presented, which I think would indicate that Taipei is part of China's one country, two systems framework, which obviously that's not something that Taiwan agrees to. And at the same time, for APEC, China has said that Taiwan needed to comply with the One China principle in order to participate. And this principle basically states that Taiwan is a part of China. So Taiwan's foreign ministry, I think, in response to that, has said that that's not the case. When they signed the agreement to join APEC all the way back in 1991 to become a full member, they said that basically the foreign ministry said that the agreement never mentioned the One China principle anywhere, and it had assured Taiwan that it could participate on an equal basis with other members. But other than that, I think Taipei has also expressed concerns about the personal safety of Taiwanese delegates if they do travel to China next year. So this comes as China has been increasingly kind of wielding its legal tools against the Taiwanese. So, for example, in 2024 June, Taipei actually raised its travel warning for China to orange, which is the second highest level in a 4-tier system. And this was because Beijing at the time threatened to impose the death penalty in extreme cases for diehard Taiwan independent separatists. And by doing something like that, that immediately raises the alarm for a lot of Taiwanese traveling to China, especially when I think a lot of these laws are quite open to interpretation. They're not very clear. And so anything you say could be potentially deemed pro-independence, which, I mean, that could come with penalties. So yeah, the personal safety, I think, is another issue with participating in APEC next year.
One last question for me. I just want to give our readers a sneak preview into an important story that ST's Taiwan Bureau will be working on in early 2026. And we had a preliminary discussion about how Beijing has been using the southern provinces, especially Fujian, as a sort of a demonstrative platform for how reunification could look like and what benefits it might bring. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and what is the average Taiwanese perception of the mainland right now?
So the story that you mentioned will be focused on the outlying islands, and that is the outlying islands, Jinmen in particular, is very close to China. And so people over there have very close ties with China. So they see themselves as very close. But I think that is very different from what a lot of the majority of the Taiwanese on the main Taiwan island believe. So I think it'll be very interesting to kind of explore not just identity, but what China is doing, some of the tools it's wielding towards these outlying islands to perhaps try to absorb it in a different way. And whether that's effective or not is a different question. So we will be looking at that. So stay tuned.
Yes, and that is a wrap for this episode. So for those of you who keep close tabs on the cross-strait issue, I am sure you are bracing yourself for more action in 2026, especially when Trump and Xi will meet again. But at least for now, I suppose Taiwan seems to be able to count on Japanese PM Takaichi for some sort of diplomatic or security assurance. This is Asian Insider. I'm Albert Wai. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family. You can also sign up for our Asian Insider newsletter. This episode was produced and edited by Faiza Sani. Thank you for joining us.